Hello, my name is Jorge Restrepo. I'm principal and founder of EurekaFacts, a full-service research and analysis firm. What we'll do today is we'll go over some basic overview of data collection and the importance of data collection in market, public opinion, and social science research. So to get started, one of the first things in terms of a general overview of data collection is that data collection is a key element of the research process. It can be complex, and unfortunately, not enough companies pay close attention to ensuring the quality that will produce the right information when you're said and done with your research study. In short, the information is only as good as the quality of your source data. So garbage in, garbage out. If you're making important decisions, you need to make sure that the data has been collected according to a quality process so that the foundation on how an organization may be making its choices is going to be sound and stable. Furthermore, there are other people that will be looking at your information, making sure that the information has its own accountability. Basically, that the process can be traced back if there's a finding or any particular aspect, that you can trace it back to the source, and that in general research is something that you should be able to replicate in many instances. So the documentation in the whole process and the quality process is of paramount importance. Once the data has been collected, the options to arrive at quality information are rather limited. So you're not able to influence. There may be some things that you can do when the data is less than perfect, but a flawed process has no going back. One of the aspects of research, especially if you, for example, didn't survey the right population, if you didn't obtain a sample that was free of bias, there may be a lot of challenges in how you can fix any of these situations that threaten the integrity of a research process. So along the way, documentation and quality process management brings traceability of findings. Good research should be documented so it can be tracked, and it can be findings can be traced back and replicated. So before you begin any kind of data collection process, let's talk about some of the foundational aspects. First, make sure you have a defined objective. Very frequently, we see when we're assisting an effort that there is a long list of information requirements, that some of them may be required, some of them may be nice to know, others may be just out of curiosity. And in that process, if you don't have a clear objective for what you want to capture, then you're not only subjecting your respondents through a painful process, but your data quality and integrity will suffer, sometimes yielding information that is not very relevant altogether. So once the objective has been defined, make sure that you know for certain what is it that you need to capture, how the information will be used, who are your information stakeholders, who would be the best informants. Sometimes you need to go back to different kinds of populations to collect the right kind of data. Another aspect that is often overlooked is that when you look at the information that you want to capture, you want to make sure that you can assess whether the respondents, the informants that you're selecting, are able to produce the answers in the way that you're asking them. For example, if you ask for recall on the number of times that somebody, let's say, went to have dinner in the past year at a restaurant, people may not be able to remember that. So keep in mind the ways in which you're asking the information and the ability for the respondent to understand your question, recall the answer, produce an answer back to you in a way that is consistent across your target population. So in that statement of your information mission, you need to understand what you need to know, who are the best informants, what is already known. There is no point in replicating data collection. Data collection is expensive, so you want to make sure that you're going for primary data collection only when there is a need to do so. Look at how the data will be used. And in that process, sometimes this will impact, or not sometimes, in most cases, it will impact how you need to ask for information and how you will treat the analysis. So to that extent, before you embark in data collection, you need to have a full research plan. Know that for every question that you ask, there is an information requirement, and for every variable or question element, you will have a way to analyze that information. So let's look at some of the common data collection methods. Often, the most frequently that are used are interviews, focus groups, observation, and surveys. And those are very broad categories. Let's take a closer look. So for interviews, there are different types of interviews. Generally, a one-on-one interview has the benefit of exploring individuals' perceptions, their experiences. You're focused on the individual. You know what this person's perspective, opinion, or experience has been. So you're focused on that person rather than the general experience. It's optimal for understanding sensitive topics. So you can develop more rapport with respondent, get to information that will be more sensitive if you do it on a one-on-one basis rather than as a group. Some of the aspects that are not so positive for this method is that it can be time-consuming, it can be expensive because you're spending one-on-one time using a trained interviewer that will be working with the respondent. One of the benefits that I neglected to mention was the fact that you can organize an inquiry to have greater diversity. So for hard-to-reach populations, for executives, for and people with disabilities, it may be easier to schedule a one-on-one interview rather than trying to get a group of individuals in the same room. Some of the types of interviews will be, you have some interviews that are structured, others are semi-structured, and then you get to the ones that are more fluid, that are called in-depth interviews, IDIs for short. Special kind of interviews, and we conduct this a lot at EurekaFacts, are cognitive interviews, in which you're trying to understand how people are understanding, perceiving, understanding, processing any kind of instruction or any kind of request, and how they produce the answers. And this has vast applications throughout all kinds of efforts, and in testing instruments as well. And another aspect of the interviews would be usability interviews. So in those instances, we're looking at how people are interacting with a system, with an interface, with a website, with a device, and we are including both interview and also observational aspects in that particular process. So that takes us to some of the cognitive and usability research, and in that we're understanding the perception. In many of these cognitive studies, we're also assessing affective response. So how does the individual respond not only rationally, but on the emotional front, what advertising is generating in terms of emotional affective responses. So to that extent, the way that these interviews are conducted, we generally have a cog lab, a cognitive lab, in which we're looking at the ways in which people are responding. We have behavioral coders that are observing the expressions of the individual, looking at other aspects of the task that is presented to the person. And of course, we're also introducing a level of interview that is all providing a stream of data to inform the study. So at EurekaFacts, we have multiple labs for cognitive testing, for usability testing, in which we use the one-way mirrors. We use equipment that is allows us to look at how people are, let's say, responding using a tablet or a computer and tracing back the steps, or using other methods to collect additional streams of data, like the eye tracking, for example. So there's a lot of advance in this field, and we're always looking at how can we bring additional streams of information to inform an interview. Then let's look at when we're going in a group, a typical effort, a lot of people jump immediately into any study. We need to run focus groups. Focus groups are fun. They're great. You have a group of people. We take them through a moderated discussion to elicit responses. So it has a great kind of strength of being able to elicit information. People can build on each other's ideas. And if you have, when you have a good moderator, you take them through a path that is not necessarily the obvious path. It's not a forced script, but it's rather using something that is called a moderator's guide. And that moderator's guide is intended to guide the discussion without much intervention from the moderator to have people discuss the topic at hand. And so through that, we have a better understanding of the perceptions. The strengths of focus groups are that we uncover a lot of the ranges of thoughts, opinions, perceptions, and the possibilities and how people explore different topics. This is great to shape future inquiry and to better understand a particular kind of perception on a particular topic. What it's not good at, it's in quantifying among a population, because like the interviews, the or cognitive testing, the focus groups are qualitative research. Qualitative research cannot be projected to the entire population. It only gets projected to the group itself. So the way that we use this type of data collection is in a way that is either in a formative or explanatory mode to look at the kinds of thoughts that people have, and then we bring those into articulating surveys that are other means of data collection that will help us better understand the magnitudes involved in percentage of people that respond one way or the other, the incidence of a particular situation or opinion or attitude. So in focus groups, we have multiple ways to configure them, but the most common ones will be what it's called a full group. You may have 10 to 12 people. They're all engaged in the discussion, and you have one moderator. Sometimes we bring it down to smaller groups because you want to enhance the depth of discussion. So if you have 12 people around the table, you get more me toos. And if you have, let's say, 5 to 7 people, then you're able to probe more deeply into the whole effort. And then you have other smaller groups like dyads or triads. And focus groups can be conducted, of course, in person or online. So in terms of focus groups, one of the optimal ways to conduct them is there are specialized facilities. At EurekaFacts, we have specialized research facilities that have the one-way mirror. We can configure the tables to be in the kind of setting that is optimal for the particular study. And behind the mirror, you will have the client. You as the research lead or director can be probably observing from the back as the moderator is going to be administering and conducting the focus groups, and it gives you a first-hand view. But always remember, when you're observing a focus group, you're looking at one data point. When we're conducting focus groups, you want to conduct multiple sessions of the study, because people will be people. You will have different dynamics in different groups, and you want to make sure that you're getting to the right kind of bottom line in terms of the information. Having said that, it's still not a method that you can project to the population. It simply gives you a better range, a better set of ranges of opinions and thoughts in the population. So then we go to the other means of data collection that are more commonly used, and that is survey research. In terms of survey research, what we're doing with surveys is that we're capturing information from respondents in a structured and consistent fashion. It's optimal for measuring magnitude among populations. So yes, pluses would be that you have the incidence of, let's say, customer satisfaction, percentage of people that are satisfied, percentage of people that are not satisfied. It gives you the demographic makeup of a group. What percentage of the people that are in your, let's say, your program participants or your customers are male, female, by age group, by cohort. You have a lot of ways to gauge the information. And because you can, when you properly sample, you can project that to the entire population. So that's the core benefit. The one of the aspects that survey research has is that it does take more time, and it does cost more than conducting a few interviews. But generally, that's why you're starting with ways to understand a topic through interviews, and then going into focus groups, and later arriving at a measurement within the survey instruments. So surveys can take many forms. You want to try to keep them condensed, very focused on the information that you require. When people go too long responding to questions, mind goes off. Your data starts looking very much the same, so you don't have the same kind of sharpness in the responses, and you cannot make sense of the resulting information. So less is much, much more in this. Some of the modes that are used for surveys. You have probably seen online surveys that you can conduct either on the computer, on a tablet, or on a mobile device. There are self-administered surveys. People keep saying that paper will go away, but still there is a lot of room for self-administered paper surveys. And then telephone surveys are another way of conducting data collection. In some instances, apps are being used for data collection, and then intercept surveys can be administered as well. What we find most effective, especially if you're looking at surveys in which you need to have a very precise read of the population, those that respond early on a first mode may be different from the entire population. So we use multiple modes. At EurekaFacts, we have conducted surveys in which we start the development effort through interviews, through focus groups. Once we go through that phase, we develop a survey instrument. We test it, with cognitive testing. Then we go into the administration of the survey with a multiple mode strategy. That is, we may send something out to the respondent to have them complete online. So it may be an email, it may be a postcard or a letter, have them complete online. From those that did not complete then the survey online, we may send 1, 2, 3, up to 7 waves of a paper-based survey, because you want to make sure that your response rate is high. And then sometimes you still haven't received enough response, so you may go in with which is the most expensive component of data collection. That would be a telephone survey. But if you're doing that to supplement your sample, then you're using the telephone to fill in those places where you did not get enough response. So the multiple mode can cut across, and it generally generates a much better, more robust data set that is reflective of your population. So those are some of the modes that are commonly used, and then they all inform, in terms of types of surveys, they all inform the kinds of inquiries that you may have. So I've spoke briefly about the calibration and the quality for survey instruments. At EurekaFacts, we take that very seriously. Once a survey is out, you need to know how it's going to be produced, what data will be coming back, and how to interpret that information. So we first take a survey through what we call a heuristic review. We've developed the instrument, we take it through a set of experts, and we review for comprehension, for the scales need to be corresponding to the kinds of question. We have to look at the ways in which we're going to be presenting questions so that you don't have a treatment effect. And there are an array of other variables, other kinds of checkpoints that we go through to make sure that the survey has been developed to the best practices that we have. Then we will pre-test the survey internally. And so that effort is important. Sometimes you go through the whole effort, you have programmed the survey, and you want to make sure that it's flowing in the right way for the different types of respondents. We then take it through the cognitive testing that I described, and you do a final pre-test and soft launch. And then that is at a point in which, as a client or leading a survey effort, you want to make sure that the information that you're getting is the information that you can use, that the types of variables or the types of questions that you're asking are actually coming through your data, so that you don't have any surprises at the end. And very important, do not forget, especially in this area where we're conducting a lot of studies maybe with government agencies. If you're working with sensitive topics, make sure that you're using an IRB, an internal review board. Is a set of scientists and non-scientists that will review your research plan to make sure that you have human subject protection, that in that process you're not harming people by conducting a survey. And sometimes you don't think of what the implications may be, but in sensitive issues, these kinds of problems might come up, and it's important to have an IRB. So when you're working with an organization, make sure that they have one, and that is part of your process. Second part would be if you're conducting a study for a federal agency, there's the process called the OMB. Office of Management and Budget requires that any data collection of 10 people or more go through an OMB process, clearance. So at our company, we have expertise and experience in taking people through that process. With our clients, we work in tandem to make sure that we obtain the clearances in a way that doesn't disrupt the project schedule. And also importantly, the information that we capture usually has what we call PII, personally identifiable information. It may be personal health information. So this brings us back to compliance, training of people, making sure that we have the security of our systems and the data collection, that you don't want to have any kind of breach with personal information, with health information, because they are subject to the Privacy Act. They're subject to HIPAA, which are laws that need to be respected, and we have to protect the confidentiality of respondents. So these are all elements of data collection that are important to take into account, because that only informs a better inquiry, and it also protects the organization and the clients, the users of that information. So some of in recap, we've gone through the types of data collection, whether they be qualitative studies with interviews, with usability tests, with cognitive testing, with focus groups, and also quantitative studies like the surveys and other observations that be quantitatively estimating a population's response or the incidence of data that you're trying to collect. When do these get used? And I'll give you an example. They're everywhere in terms of effort. So you may use data collection in program evaluation. But even before you evaluate a program, in shaping the program, the advertising, the communication, you can have, and it's optimal to have formative research leading into the development of strategies and communications. You optimize your messaging by conducting research with some of these data collection efforts, and then you evaluate your programs and your outcomes through an array of these data collection methods. In gathering customer insights, measuring customer satisfaction, we use these extensively, day in and day out. And then within organizations, at the workforce level, they're also used to measure organizational climate. So what are the perceptions, what is the morale, what are the attitudes within the workforce, and that informs how the organization can improve. So both internal and external to an organization, you have research avenues to inform your strategies and your tactics, and you choose the data collection methods that are most appropriate depending on the information mission. I do invite you to take a look go to our website at EurekaFacts.com and look in the white papers. There is one tool that we have that is called 12 Tips for Successful Customer Surveys, from Plan to Action. And it is intended to guide you through some of the key questions that you need to ask yourself as you prepare to engage in a survey data collection effort. Thank you again for listening, and enjoy the rest of your class.